Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, how dare you, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now, we are joined by 10th Man, Chocolate Saying, Mitchell from Australia, Brian's Logic, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, indeed.
Whoa.
G'day.
That was unexpected.
Hello.
So much enthusiasm, it clipped my output level. Hopefully that didn't sound terrible for the live audience. I'll have to address that. Thank you for the sound check. And welcome to Eli as well. Well, with that level of enthusiasm, I'm going to go straight into housekeeping questions. So, any evidence of a physical, geometric sphere-edge horizon, formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
No evidence at all. We would not have this show. We would not be talking about the big lie if there was. That's all we're asking them is show us Earth curve, and they still can't do it.
Well, they never will be able to. We debunked what they claim is Earth curve, which is a physical geometric sphere-edge horizon. Well, they haven't got that anymore. We debunked it in 2020. Any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline?
Well, don't all go at once, but that's an impossible task.
How many curves are on a triangle?
Say again?
They don't even do it. All their measurements come from the equatorial plane, which is flat. All their measurements to all the stars derive from there because they need a flat baseline to do it. They never do it from this projected arc of the surface, ever.
One more time, fresh grown flowers.
Just asking how many straight lines are on a sphere.
None.
The last I checked, there were no B lines on a sphere.
There were no what lines?
B lines, base lines?
No, correct, none. Right.
That's why they take the measurements from the equatorial plane of their ball that doesn't exist. They cut it in half to get a plane because there is no plane on the surface.
So you're saying they take a big axe and cut the Earth in half?
It's in all their diagrams. It's in their rhetoric. All their measurement angles come from the center of the Earth. That equatorial plane doesn't end at the arc surface of the Earth. It goes to the celestial sphere. That whole thing is flat.
Wow.
Nathan, I put some slides in Master B. Could you pull them up, please?
Yeah, sure. Which one's the first one?
The first one
11.
says parallel lines make equal angles with parallel planes.
Yeah, it's up.
So this is what we're doing when we measure an elevation angle. That celestial horizon, that's the equatorial plane. And those two lines there, the artificial horizon and the celestial horizon, they're parallel lines. That is only available in Euclidean geometry. That's what we're doing when we measure elevation angles, when we do anything to do with celestial navigation. Slide 2, Nathan. This is a Euclidean proposition 30. Straight lines parallel to the same line, to the same straight line, are also parallel to one another. This is only available in Euclidean geometry. Third slide, Nathan. These are Euclidean axioms. Number 1, a straight line can be drawn between any 2 points. Number 2, a finite line can be extended indefinitely in both directions. Number 3, a circle can be drawn with any center and any radius. Now that's Euclidean geometry, a circle, a nice flat 2D shape. Number 4, all right angles are equal to one another, to each other. And number 5, given a line and a point not on the line, only the line can be drawn through the point parallel to the line. That is the Euclidean parallel postulate. So parallel lines, they are lines that do not intersect each other. That was what we saw in the first slide with the artificial horizon parallel to the celestial horizon or the equatorial plane. The parallel postulate is valid only for the Euclidean geometry. There are many other geometries, which is non-Euclidean geometry, for which parallel postulates is invalid. So under the heading curved space there, Euclidean geometry is flat. Imagine you have a piece of paper and a ball. A piece of paper has no curvature. The surface of the ball is curved. There is curvature. Curved space cannot be described by the Euclidean geometry. Therefore, it is called non-Euclidean. In curved space, there is a characteristic length scale r. An example is the surface of the Earth. Third slide, Nathan. Sorry, next slide is probably fourth here.
I'm there.
Sorry.
I'm on the fourth slide. Sorry, we're talking over
geometry.
each other. We are
That's
affirmative on the fourth slide.
Spherical geometry. It's basically the surface of a sphere. All lines will eventually intersect. No parallel lines exist. You cannot do anything to do with celestial navigation, parallel lines, artificial horizon, parallel to the celestial horizon or the equatorial plane. You cannot do that on a sphere. In spherical geometry, the sum of the interior angles of a triangle is greater than two right angles. Pi equals 180 degrees. In flat geometry, which is Euclidean geometry, the sum of the angles of the triangle must always be 180 degrees. The circumference of a circle, this is another point here too, the circumference of a circle is less than pi times the diameter. That's in spherical geometry. In flat geometry, the circumference of a circle must always be pi times the diameter. That's what we're doing when we work out the circle of equal altitude. If you look on that picture, this says spherical geometry, you've got a circle there. That circle on the sphere, that circumference has to be less than 2 pi r. That's not a Euclidean circle. You cannot put a circle of equal altitude, a 2D shape, 2D circle, on a spherical surface. It does not work. Next slide, Nathan. This is the circle of equal altitude that we are actually working out from Euclidean geometry. That is a 2D circle. The circumference of that circle is 2 pi r. You cannot put that on a spherical surface. Next slide, Nathan. This is what they think they're doing. They think they're putting a circle of equal altitude, a 2D shape, onto a spherical surface. It does not work. We are only using Euclidean geometry in celestial navigation. If you think you're doing anything with the sphere, you need to use spherical geometry. They do not compute. We are living on a flat Earth. Euclidean geometry is flat Earth geometry. That's the end of my little presentation.
Was that someone else's slide afterwards?
Yeah, that wasn't mine, that next one.
Okay, no worries. Thank you very much. Yeah, epic. So was that you, Brian?
Yeah, I have something to present when everyone's finished.
Everyone
Okay, let me, can I, hey, Brian.
Hey, like.
I just find it, let me just read this here. Great circle. A circle on the surface of a sphere, which lies in a plane passing through the sphere's center. What does that mean?
Equatorial plane.
A circle on the surface of the sphere, which lies in a plane passing through the sphere's center.
Okay, well, it's double speak. Something that's at the surface can't be at its center or simultaneously. It's just double speak. But what they're saying is, when you measure a sphere surface to get an angle you can't get, imagine that it's on a flat plane in the middle of that sphere. That's essentially what that double speak dilutes down to.
That's what I got.
Before Brian goes, and if Eli's finished, I set up some slides a little bit before Mitchell's. Can you go to that?
what's
We
the
pretty
first
much
slide?
have a couple of
I
slides.
just want to say that wasn't correct what you said about the Great Circle Route.
Oh, hold on, 10th. You have to hold off. Go ahead, Brian.
Yo,
Yeah,
look
what they're
at how
talking
they-
about. What they're talking about is a slice taking off the side of a globe. Like it's a circle. So what's a circle? It's a 2D. So they're talking about, like, if they're talking about a great circle route, they could be just take one of the longitude lines that goes from their south pole around to their south pole again. So that would be a great circle route.
Yeah.
That's just a slice. So it's a circle. But on a map, what's a great circle route?
See, that's my bad. Great question, because that's the second part. No, I was going to say that's the second part of the definition I didn't read. So, as it represents the shortest distance between any 2 points of a sphere, a great circle of the Earth is preferred route taken by a ship. So that's the double speak, because actually, if you just slice the sphere in half, like you're saying, the point from A to B, which is actually a straight line, is that's insane, son.
Yeah, on a map, a great circle route is just a straight line. It's a curved line on the globe because they have a globe, but in reality, it's just a straight line. You lay it out on the map, it's a straight line. So,
Can you
Great circles.
Can you back off your mic just a couple of inches, Eli? You're scaring the white folk.
Can I borrow some brown sugar?
I
That's
didn't think it would be that
hilarious.
funny. Come on, let's not lose the momentum. Are we done with that? Are we
Just
moving
before
on with
10th.
housekeeping, or did Mitch? I had Mitch, I think.
No, I
Just
have.
before 10th goes, sorry 10th. We
No, go
were
on.
talking about something yesterday when there was no show. We got into quite a good discussion because the great circle on a sphere is the only way they can actually get a circumference on a sphere, because there is no circumference of a sphere. When who was it? Eratosthenes was doing his little thing when globe believers thought that he was measuring a circumference on a sphere. You can't actually. There is no circumference of a sphere. A great circle route is a circle, a 2D object. That's
Okay,
the only thing that has
stop.
a
Before you
circumference.
dig a hole, just the sphere. There's no circle for their sphere. Contextualize it with what they're talking about. When you say a sphere, the way you said it was there's no circumference on a sphere. Well, yeah, there is. But I know what you mean. You mean the sphere they claim when they're measuring the ground, and they're saying is the ground when they're not just dictating an arbitrarily assigned circle that they're going to call a circumference for a sphere. Well, that sphere is the one you're talking about when you say a sphere, correct? Please say yes. Please, God, say yes.
Yes, correct.
Thank God. I just don't want someone to trim that out. Mitchell said a sphere doesn't have a circumference. Yeah, screw you. No, we all know what he meant contextually.
I
If
mean,
I'm reading this right,
I'll help Mitchell. Go on, Eli.
I mean, in all contexts, spheres do not have circumferences. You can trim that out and then have a go at me. Spheres do not have circumferences.
Mitchell's correct.
From what I'm reading,
Hold on. This is news. Hold on, Eli. Hold on, Eli. I just heard something that made me cringe, and then Brian followed it up with, "That's correct." Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, on their sphere, their equator is their circumference, but the equator is also a great circle route. And the great circle route is a circle. But a sphere itself doesn't have an edge, so
Correct.
it can't have a circumference. But on their globe, the circumference is the equator or the polar circumference. But they are great circle.
I told you guys not to argue this.
Hold on. Everyone shut up.
Oh.
Hello. I'm sorry, 10th. I know you're in the wings. I do realise that you're keeping ever waited longer, and there's just a John add to the tail end of that, which I want to hear also. Go ahead, John.
Well, my whole belief on it is that the second dimension is part of the third dimension. So anything that's two-dimensional is ipso facto part of the third dimension.
Oh my God. What You're going to have to clarify that now, because no.
I was just going to say that. What?
Two-dimensional's two-dimensional. I can very easily conceptualize something in the two-dimensional realm without it having a third dimension to it. What are you talking about?
The third dimension is made up of, has the second dimension as part of it.
I think,
You don't have
I think he was saying the opposite. Like you need the other 2 dimensions to make it 3. I think that's my bugging.
I don't know. What I want to
saying.
know is why we still have a declaration that, even though Brian, further to what Mitch said, contextualise it also with the sphere model and the equator, we still have a statement that there's no outside edge of a sphere to acquire a circumference. Is it circumference? The plural, lots of them.
That is correct. Yeah, there was a big discussion yesterday. When this is what happens when you don't have a show, Nathan. We get into these discussions, and I wish it would have been on the show. But there is no circumference. There is no edge to a sphere. There is an edge to a circle, a 2D shape. That's how you get a circumference of a circle, and that's why they need a great circle on their sphere. But the sphere inherently has no circumference. It has no edge. There are no edges on a sphere.
So, see, that's the thing.
Nathan.
There's an infinite number of circumferences to a sphere.
That's why it's called an open surface. Hold on. That's why I call it an open surface. You don't call it like a ball. Just say an open surface that moves through different volumes of space inside of a low pressure system, and there's gravity that acts as a container.
Stop it. Stop. We are just talking about spheres. We are not... This is frustrating. You must be more specific. When we're talking about just geometry, just how a sphere is described with words, right? Let's not get confused with what we're talking about with globes and gravity. And no. We're just talking about... I want to peg down what you guys mean when you say a sphere doesn't have a circumference. I want to peg that down. I know 10th is still waiting. I'm sorry. Who was that? Riven. Sorry.
And I'm also, I've just completely forgotten.
I'm fine, Nathan. Just take your time.
I was away with the favors anyway. I started just talking like all globe-tard.
Don't worry about it. Okay. John. Then Eli.
I was just saying that a sphere has an infinite number of circumferences. It just depends on where you take that 2 dimensions from on that 3-dimensional object.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's the first logical thing I've heard so far. Great. Brian, do you want to disagree with that? Because it seemed like you were agreeing with Mitch.
Eli. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm in agreement with that, but I'd have to preface what I mean. So, Eli, you go ahead.
No, you did with the horizon. Go ahead, Eli.
Brian.
Sorry, Eli. You did preface it with the what was it? The equator, Brian. So you did already. Go ahead, Eli. Sorry to overtalk you.
So Brian got to it, but then also John also got to it, because as I'm looking at the images, really a great circle is just the circumference. But so think about it this way. What is not a great circle is if you didn't cut off 50% of a sphere, but say cut off 20% of it instead. See, that's not a great circle. A great circle is 50%, which would give you a plane, and around that circle is exactly half, right? So that's technically a circumference, but from any 2 points of the sphere, which is an infinite number of points.
A circumference is a 2D description relating to a circle. I hope Adam's listening. I hope you weigh in on this, Adam. I know you're hanging in the background. You don't want to come in, but I did ask Adam about this because I know he's up on the maths a lot more than we are, and that's what I got out of Adam. A circumference is a 2D description relating to a circle. I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Sorry, Mitchell, I thought you were finished. Nathan, when the boat in their model goes over the horizon, it's still falling over an edge, because the horizon, even though it wouldn't be a great circle, it would be part of a circle. So the horizon, it would also be a circle within their belief, within their model. So it is falling over an actual edge.
No, you're good. I get all of that. I follow all of that. It's just the way it was phrased was pretty appalling. And, someone's just going to trim that out if he didn't get 10 minutes of contextualisation from us, which he's now had. But what I think that the summary of the point is to say that you can derive a circle on the ground you're standing upon, and call it whatever you like. Let's call it the equator. But what that does not equate to is whether or not you want to bandy words about the description and definition, a circumference of a sphere. That is a presupposition after you've just drawn an arbitrary circle on the ground. Well, yes, you can draw circles. Do they equate to the outside edges of spheres? No, they do not. Has anybody else got anything to add to that summary? If not, 10th man will go, and then we'll move on with housekeeping.
Why do we even allow them to use an open-ended variable to find a finite variable?
What's the open-ended variable? That's just a presupposition. What variable?
Pi.
Well, the assumption of is the presupposition that I detailed in my summary.
Pi is what they're using, correct?
Yeah, but if you're deriving any arbitrary circle through any means, the point of the discussion is that when you do that on the ground, which you can do, it isn't the presuppositional outside edge of a sphere surface when you arbitrarily draw a circle on the ground. Okay? Anyone else? If not, 10th, go ahead.
Are you on my slides? There are a couple of postings in Master B prior to your show link.
What's the first one?
It's the one that same one as Mitchell showed, the square box with the co-altitude.
Okay.
All right. So Mitchell showed this. In fact, we have a couple of slides that, unbeknownst to each other, we shared this morning. You can see here, this is the sub-point method as described, figure 14.1. And you see the 90-degree box, even though it's not a box, but it is 90 degrees. So you can put a box or you can put the angle there. And it says here that you have a co-altitude, and it uses the observer's zenith. And it also has the zenith of the star, in this case. GP over the Earth is called the subpoint. And then the observer's position would be the observer's GP. And you can see those are two vertical zeniths. And then the co-altitude on top, as well as the baseline on the bottom, are key to this, because if your height observed is 60 degrees, as shown here, then you minus that from 90. And when you minus that from 90, 60 minus 90 is 30. 30 times 60 nautical miles is 1,800 nautical miles zenith distance. That top straight line, the co-altitude, will match that baseline exactly. So you are on the Earth's surface 1,800 miles away from that star's position that's posted in the Nautical Almanac or the Air Almanac. So you could do another circle of equal altitude and a third and get a fix, and you know where you are in relationship to where they are. This is pretty simple, well documented, and it needs a 90. Always a 90. Next slide. So what happens when you're on the surface of a sphere, and Mitchell shared this slide as well, and you need to do this when the baseline is curved? Well, you use an artificial horizon, a bubble section, for example, because this is from the air navigation book that I bought, and you create a plane called the artificial horizon. And it's going to match the celestial horizon in their celestial sphere model, where the Earth's equator keeps extending outwards until it hits the celestial horizon, and then it keeps extending until it hits the celestial sphere at an infinite distance. You have a plane. Well, as long as you have a plane that's on top of a plane, and the stars are so far away, the angle is going to be the same as long as that light from the star is coming in parallel. So the key to their whole model is using a plane and star or sunlight being parallel. But really what they're doing is letting the cat out of the bag by showing that all the navigation stars that are used are based from the center. And what do you see there at the center of this circle, but it's supposed to be a sphere? You see a baseline all the way through Earth, all the way to the celestial sphere. So if all measurements are coming from a plane at the center, and it goes all the way to the celestial sphere through space and everything else in their model, then really all they have is flat Earth measurements. And what they do with an artificial horizon is they use a bubble to give them that horizontal at their eye line, which is either called the astronomical horizon or the sensible horizon, because that's where their eyes are. This can never be done when using a marine sextant using the Earth's horizon, which is the surface of the Earth, because they have to do dip correction to get their eye onto the sea level, height of eye correction. And you know they're in trouble when they keep referring to angles. You don't need a right angle. Okay, well, when we go to the previous slide, if you would, what you see there in the subpoint method is 2 right angles. It's a box with 4 90s. You could put a 90 at every corner there. This is how it's done. And when they keep saying they don't need right angles, they're fooling themselves. You need a right angle. You just can't get one off a curved surface. So they use a bubble section or artificial horizon, and you say 2 lines is all I need. I don't need to minus from 90. Well, yes, you do, because you need a right angle triangle. And it's always the follow-up. Once you get your elevation angle, no matter which method you use, whether you use a tray with mercury, or you use a bubble sextant, or you use the marine sextant and shoot the Earth's horizon from the surface. Guess what you have to do once you do corrections to get true altitude, which is right angle? Guess what you have to do? You have to minus from 90. But it's a right angle triangle that you minus from. So how could they say it's not? Next slide. So this one shows co-altitude and zenith distance from a side-on view. And you can see here in this one, it's a 40-degree elevation angle taken not from the surface, but the center of the Earth. And you see that parallel line going right through the Earth with the dotted part, and then it becomes solid all the way to the celestial horizon, all the way to where the stars are in the celestial sphere. That's a flat plane, buddy. And you've got a 40-degree angle from that flat plane. And so you minus that from 90 is 50. 50 times 60 is 3,000 nautical miles. That whole globe picture is a joke because they're never getting it from the surface that's curved. They always get it from the flat plane, equatorial plane. Next slide. All about angles. Right angle measures exactly 90 degrees. An acute angle measures less than 90 degrees. An obtuse angle measures more than 90 degrees. The right angle is the one being used for Earth. The acute angle is your measurement prior to minusing it from 90. That could be anything from 5 degrees up to 89. It don't matter. The acute is the angle of elevation. It must be minus from 90, the right angle above, to get your co-altitude. There is no obtuse angle in celestial navigation. Next slide shows a picture that shows the Earth, the equator, and the celestial equator, the equinoctial, you might say, all the way to the celestial sphere, as you can see here. It's just not showing the stars here in this one diagram. All right, so you could see where right ascension is at 0 equator line. They have to have that 0 baseline. It's 0 all the way to the stars. It's 0 on their circle as well. Next slide. Celestial equator divides the sky into northern and southern hemispheres. If Earth's equator is projected out into space, celestial equator can be obtained. Well, they're just telling you right here what they're doing. It's a plane all the way from the center to the celestial sphere. And all the nautical almanac measurements are done from that equatorial plane, which means it's all flat surface because has to be an angle, has to be minus from 90. I'm done. Any questions?
Oh, that's perfect.
I'd like to-
Other than to say that it's redundant, or not redundant, useless. When you take this circle, so I'm just going to go back to your, I think it's your first slide, and you've got this circle, and it's showing you 90 degrees being measured below the star, and there's your position, and here's the circle that you're drawing out after getting the GP from the almanac and the time. That's what you end up with, right? That's the circle. If I now go to your last slide, that's the same circle. This massive disc that runs outside of this tiny little ball that's in the middle that's completely useless in terms of the measurement, because if the star was up at this arrow point and you were measuring its GP, it would be parallel to your GP, which would be running to the centre of this sphere that's totally not used and useless, and then out along this disc to 90-degree point below the star. So that would be your box in this diagram. So you've got your GP, and you're measuring it according to them on the equatorial plane. That means you're in the centre of their rock sphere that isn't used in this measurement. And then 90 degrees out to the base where, on that flat plane, the star's ground position is, its geographical position, its GP. Well, that's also a 90 degree at this position, from your feet to where the star meets at 90 degrees. So this bit in the middle, the globe, totally useless in that process, because what I've just drawn out with the zenith of the observer in the middle of a rock that's not being used and out to the GP of the star, that square, that box that I'm now drawing on screen, correlates to this box. But not only that, the circle that's being drawn out in this particular example can be bigger, because you can draw out more circles to other stars, all on flat planes. But all of them must have 90 degrees for this box, for everything to be parallel. Now, as soon as you curve the ground, these stop being parallel, and the functionality of celestial navigation breaks down. You need it to function on a flat plane, and it does. Anybody else got any remarks?
Everything you just described then. Sorry, Brian, you can go first.
No, Mitchell, you go. I go ahead.
Okay, can I
So
ask-
everything that
Sorry, Mitch, go ahead, man.
everything that you just described there, Nathan, is Euclidean geometry. Can you go back to 10's first slide? If we go through the Euclidean axioms, number one, a straight line can be drawn between any 2 points. So a straight line from the observer, the ground beneath the observer's feet, to the GP of the star, that's a straight line. Number two, a finite line can be extended infinitely in both directions. That means the plane, that straight line, that can extend infinitely. That creates the equatorial plane. Number three, a circle can be drawn with any center and any radius. This is a Euclidean axiom. A circle can be drawn with any center and any radius. That's what we're drawing with a circle of equal altitude, a 2D circle. It is flat. Number four, all right angles are equal to each other. We can see that with the zeniths. Those two right angles, 90 degrees, they're equal to each other. And number five, the parallel postulate. Those two zeniths are parallel to each other. These are all Euclidean geometry. As soon as you say sphere, that's spherical geometry. We haven't described anything to do with spherical geometry, anything to do with a sphere. This is all flat Earth geometry.
Not only that, in the depiction, which is why I like this, because now you can highlight where the magic trick comes, they've drawn a bent line. I mean, it completely violates what's being described to have this line bent, and they've even marked it as 90. So obviously they're aware of it to a certain level, because they can't get 90 off a curved line. But they've drawn it that way because obviously this has come from a book where on the last page of the last description, it'll also disclaim that obviously you're still on a ball though, despite everything being detailed mathematically and only capable of being done on a flat plane. But they'll still bend this line. Well, no, this isn't a 90 if you want to now say, oh, look at this diagram's describing this as a great circle. That would be their great circle. But their great circle gives them 90 degrees. My bad. Doesn't give them 90 degrees. That's their problem. The only critique on what Mitch said earlier, this is how we do it. This is how celestial navigation is done. Just in case anybody says, oh, Mitchell said it's... No, this is just the method of celestial navigation and the facts that surround it. Anybody else?
That's kind of what I was going to ask 10th Man real quick. You mentioned people saying that you don't need a 90. The people that are actually using this device to measure elevation angles out in reality, do any of them say that you don't need the 90?
No, because the final step is to minus it from 90.
Oh, so the only people saying you don't need the 90 are the people that aren't actually doing this.
Yeah, they don't want the right triangle. They don't want baseline. They don't want 90. They don't want any of that because it destroys their globe. But celestial navigation, you remember that book I could show later on survival. It shows how a person who's lost could take a string, make a right triangle, and with the use of a protractor and a weighted object as a plumb, sight stars. But it's the string is in the shape of a right triangle. All these pictures say a right triangle. Harold Jacobi says it's a right angle. And so they're all saying no, but then Eli got one of the things I posted. Eli, do you have that handy from that sailing magazine where the guy said, very simply, third grade geometry says, I don't know if you have it handy, but when you do, read that.
So the not using the 90, that's more of an anti-flat Earth comment as opposed to a glober comment, because
if you say you don't need 90, you do not know celestial navigation or how an elevation angle is subtracted from 90 to get the co-altitude for your zenith distance. Elevation angle doesn't tell you your distance. Elevation angle tells you the angular relationship off a baseline the star is. Then you minus it from 90 to get your zenith distance. It's the co-altitude that gives you your zenith distance.
That sounds like anti-celestial navigation to me. Go on, Brian.
Yeah, I just want to say two things just on it before we go further. Number one, when they change the angle, when they bring their angle from their tangent plane down to the center, down to their the plane they make through the center of their globe, they then change the visible location of the star because they must bring the star down with it. Because the stars, admittedly, through mainstream pseudoscience and astronomy, are just point sources of light. So when you change that angle mathematically down, you bring it down to the center of a globe, you then change the visible location of the star. Now, they do that because they believe that the stars are these massive things that are really, really huge and that are giving off parallel light because they're so big, even though they're so far away in their model. They're so huge that we observe the light as parallel, or we get the light as parallel, which means the inverse square law hasn't even taken effect within that model, right? Now, what I'm going to go through in a few minutes will be part of that. But this is what they have to do. But that means there isn't a GP. You can't have a GP if you have parallel light rays. There is no GP because there is no point where the center of anything, or where there is no point, no subpoint possible if you have parallel light rays, because that means the light rays are covering half of your globe, so you can't have a GP. Secondly, yeah, it can't be done. How can you have a GP under those conditions? You can't. The whole point of a GP is that you have a subpoint. There is no subpoint. But secondly, they just talk about, we only need 2 lines. This is the kind of rubbish argument to come up with. No, you need 3 lines and it is a right angle triangle. You need the horizontal baseline adjacent, you need the hypotenuse angle line, and you need the opposite, which is the zenith from the GP. To keep forgetting with that, that is the 3rd line of the right angle triangle. So every time they come up with this, we only need 2 lines, you remind them of the zenith from the GP, because the adjacent and the hypotenuse, right? The adjacent, which is the horizontal along the surface of Earth, the hypotenuse, which is the angle line, they must meet the opposite, which is the zenith from the GP. So the people who are saying these things are crazy. And as Tent says, they cite themselves. They don't cite anything really official. I just want to remind everyone, just before I finish, go back to 2021, and we had these people telling us that circles of equal altitude were great circle routes. They didn't even know the difference between those 2 things. Finished.
Eli, you got your thing up. You want to read it? Nathan, he's got the slide up.
Can't see it in the Hangout.
It's after my 2. It's after my 2.
Oh, I see. It's in Skype. Yeah. Okay. Yes, definitely. I'll pop it on screen while he reads it. Is it right? Is it right at the end? With the guy in the boat.
Is it the guy? Yeah, the guy in the boat. Eli, you want me to read it, or are you going to read it?
Definitely Eli, please, with his dulcet, bassy voice. That would be brilliant. Yeah, I'll read it out now. Eli?
He might be
He
working
says-
or on.
He says he's on the
or something.
train.
He's on the train.
Yeah.
Chocolate, why don't you read it in simplified terms? Start there.
Sorry, what transport mode has got to do with it? I don't follow, Eli. Just get your ass off mute. What's the problem? Fine. Someone else.
Me or you, Chocolate?
You just go, Tent. Just go.
Yeah, go ahead, because I
All
have
right,
to
all
go
right.
find it.
Well, I don't have that dulcet voice that he's looking for.
Neither
All right,
does
here we go.
Chocolate today. All I can hear is background noise.
In simplified terms, when we take a sextant altitude of the sun, we're creating a right angled triangle between it. The Earth's surface at the GP and ourselves. Grade school geometry tells us that the two angles in the right angled triangle must equal 90. How they get around this is impossible. If they want to take one of those things out, at the end, you must minus from 90. What's a 90? and it's amazing. I could cite this from so many sources when it comes to celestial navigation. It's worth reading again. It's like pouring salt over the wounds. In simplified terms, when we take a sextant altitude of the sun, we're creating a right angled triangle between it. The Earth's surface at the GP and ourselves. Grade school geometry tells us that the two angles in the right angle triangle must equal 90. And based on what Mitchell showed today and what I showed today, this is exactly how it works. But on the globe, it has to come from the equatorial plane because that's the only place you have a plane. What's the whole purpose of having an artificial horizon? It's artificial. What's the real horizon? Not artificial. That's why you do height of eye, get your eyeball on the sea level, and you have the same thing happening at sea because the Earth is a plane. So when they say in the artificial horizon or the bubble, we don't use the horizon. Yeah, because you have an artificial one that matches the real one, the flat plane. And all your measurements come from the center where it's the equatorial plane. You can't get away from a plane no matter what you do. You have to draw a line. Why can't you just do it off the surface of a curved Earth? Because it's impossible to get an angle with a curved baseline. Stage of the sextant.
Will you let me know when you're going to put up my thing, Nathan? I'll go through it.
Yeah, I'll do it after the super chat if you want. We still only two housekeeping questions in. How long are we into this show? 43 minutes.
Actually, I do have two slides afterwards, and then Brian, so that we can finish the subject off. So do your super chat.
I just want to say that lady in the picture that looks like she's using a sextant, that doesn't look like the center of the Earth. Am I crazy?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Hence why we usher in the term cognitive dissonance.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to read out this super chat from Godzilla37. So big shout out to you, my friend, for smashing the super chat first and foremost. Don't want to interrupt the show. Well, you definitely have done that, Godzilla37. Don't apologise, but it's all good. But I had to cancellation, and now I'm desperate. Virus. Do you do children's parties? The original clown cancelled. I think he's talking to Virus in the chat. Thank you all the same for ad-homming the chat via super chat, Godzilla37. Really appreciate it. And if you just joined us, because there's 150 people watching, which is not an insignificant amount of people to be watching a live show, very warm welcome to you. Please smash the share button. There's a good chance that the only reason there is 150 people watching is because the people who are watching have already shared the show, which I obviously encourage quite a lot. So please share the show. And as I say, a very warm welcome to all of you who've just joined us. Who is next?
So you know what? People like to talk about what is poetry and what is definite, right? And there's a lot of different arenas that comes up. So in this case, when they're saying, "Oh, we're getting that angle measurement from the equatorial plane," like but then you know, you either have depictions of people doing it on the surface, or you have cartoons of people doing it on an equatorial plane. So, in that sense, you know, is that poetry or is that literal, do you think?
Well, it's a bit of both, because when they transpose a sphere outside edge to the equatorial plane, that bit's total fantasy, because you can't measure an angle on a curved surface to transpose it to the middle of an equatorial plane. But the equatorial plane, if you ignore a little ball wrapped around the middle of it, let's just see if I can bring up a diagram to make my point. If you ignore the ball in the middle of it, what you've actually just got is a great big plane, yeah, with the stars represented in a perspective view, because that's how your eye represents the world. So it's trying to transpose how your world represents itself in a perspective view with a completely useless, not fit for purpose sphere Earth sat in the middle of a giant plane that you cannot actually get angles from. So the real bit is to say that if you're going to draw it this way, you have to get rid of the ball Earth in the middle to make it actually represent you measuring an angle on a surface. So the equatorial plane, yeah, that definitely matches as far as we can tell, unless there's any anomalies that have been worked in to, you know, make it fail for, you know, intentional purposes, like a faulty cog in the machine, so you can't figure it out, so to speak. But beyond that, it's just a flat plane with a not fit for purpose sphere in the middle that doesn't get used in any of the measurements. That's the equatorial plane. It's just not a transposition from the surface measurement, because you can't get an angle from a curved surface to move it to the centre on a plane that does more accurately represent the ground we're using, because that's what we use. Hope that answers your question.
Well, it's interesting about the equatorial plane too, because that's just a tangent plane. And when they talk about it, the horizon is the edge of the sphere, but then they want to add a dingleberry under your feet as well. It's nonsensical.
Well, when one of the Globers said, well, when us Globers are speaking about elevation angles, we aren't talking about the surface. Maybe somebody should tell that nice lady who's using a sextant that they're not talking about the surface. Maybe they should let her know.
They're not talking about their surface.
Nathan, I know Brian's got to do something on Lite, which we need to hear. I've got 2 slides up before Eli's Sailor slide, and then a few following that Sailor slide, and then I'll be done.
Black and white, starting with Zenith at the top of the picture.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm on it.
So here we go. You can see the airplane with a plane underneath it, horizontal. That's the bubble sextant. The bubble spirit level gives you level horizontal. That's the dotted line underneath the airplane. Then you've got a ship on top of a spherical Earth depiction, and it's got a tangent plane underneath it as well. Then they've got the equatorial plane emanating from the center of the Earth with a dotted plane line. Now, all those angles end up being the same, because they're saying all the light from the stars and sun is coming in parallel, which it's not, but this is how they trick people, by saying it would be a corresponding angle at each one, because that's the way it's happening. Go to the next slide. In the same video from the Navy, it shows how a circle of equal altitude is done, and there's your right angle triangle. The guy has this tape that he pulls out and then walks around this circle, and that maypole is supposed to represent the GP of a star or sun. So by them denying triangles, and I could just go to everything celestial navigation and just show that this is how it works, they've already dismissed themselves from the learned. These are zombies we're dealing with. They cannot attack the methodology of celestial navigation, so they attack us, and they make silly statements. Now, if you can go to the air navigation cover, tell me when you're there, of the slides underneath the sailing one.
Yes.
All right, so I have this book. I have volume 1, volume 2 as well. There's so many things that I haven't even shared, but here it is from the Department of the Air Force and Navy. Go to the next slide. Now, this one I'm going to read because you got to look at that picture on the top left. And that is showing a artificial horizon plane. And this is done with the bubble because this is air navigation book. But the artificial horizon would give you artificial horizon as well, like the bubble does, the one with the mercury. But let's go with this since it's aviation. If you look at the plane of the celestial horizon, it's extending outside the sphere Earth depiction, and they are parallel horizontals. Now, if you read with me just below, the horizon most used by the air navigator is the bubble or artificial horizon. As in a carpenter's level, a bubble indicates the apparent vertical and horizontal. By means of the bubble, the navigator can level the sextant and establish a reference plane parallel to the plane of the celestial horizon. This plane is the artificial horizon. The artificial horizon established by the bubble in the sextant. Notice figure 11.
Can I make a comment, please?
No, not yet. That the plane of the bubble horizon and the plane of the celestial horizon are parallel and are separated by the radius of the Earth. In comparison with the vast distances to celestial bodies, the radius of the Earth is immeasurably small. Therefore, if two parallel circles on the Earth are separated by a linear distance equal to the radius of the Earth, these two circles must appear to coincide. Thus, the artificial horizon and the celestial horizon appear to coincide and be considered identical. The geographical position of a celestial body can be determined for any time to establish a celestial line of position. The observer's position relative to the geographical position of the celestial body must be ascertained. The factor which can be measured most conveniently with some degree of accuracy is the altitude of the body. That's the elevation angle. You need a flat baseline to get that. The altitude is the celestial body in its angular distance above the observer's celestial horizon. Altitude is measured from the horizon along the great circle passing through the observer's position, and the body in figure 1122, the great circle passing through the observer is perpendicular. Okay, so you can see how they do the magic trick. They put a ball, as Nathan said, when the ball doesn't need to be there because all they need is the celestial horizon, which is one big flat plane. And it shows you right there on the left that they coincide. All the angle measurements come off a flat surface. This is the end of them. Now you can interrupt.
I just wanted to make a quick comment, which is when I was trying to explain gas pressure at a container, it's such a good question because I was trying to say to them, everything really needs a container. An egg is a container. You know, you was born with a container. Your brain's got a container. You know, nothing can be anything without being contained. You know, the container goes. You know, they ended up conceding that their container is their gravity is what they believe in. But like you said, to draw straight lines to the horizon, I like that argument. I like the way that it's drawn by 90-degree angles, and it's just saying it's from a flat plane. I think that the only way the dip angle is a good way to point out their ignorance. And I think what is it, dip angle? What they're trying to say that they locally it's flat, so they try to say that's as straight as they can get it. But then even if it comes off a certain angle, it's going to mess up all the measurements when you mathematically and in decibels. You know, you need to be as precise as you can when you're doing with intergalactic stars. If they are that far away, one slight pixel off of that measurement and everything's just incorrect.
Okay, let's stay on this because I got 2 more slides and I'll be done. You can see that the air navigator uses a bubble to create an artificial horizon, which is a plane. Why is he doing that? Because he's not on the Earth's surface. Okay, what happens when you're on the Earth's surface? Same thing happens. You use, let's say you're landlocked. You use an artificial horizon filled with mercury, and you get a reflection off of it. There's no dip correction for the bubble or the landlocked artificial horizon. There's only dip correction when you're at sea because you're actually using the real horizon. Here's the contrast. Artificial horizon, no dip. Real horizon, dip. What is dip correction? Height of eye above sea level. Oh my goodness. The Earth is flat. Next slide. This is the altitude azimuth method, the horizontal method, which is what the sextant use. You see, there is no globe Earth underneath the alt-az method. It's a plane. This is what Nathan was saying. Get rid of the globe. This is what's happening. You could see it right here. The altitude above the horizon and the azimuth measured north in a clockwise motion for the direction of that body. This is in their books. This one is telling you how it's done. So in their mind, this is what's happening from the equatorial plane. See, that bottom half of the globe is gone in this picture because there is no globe. Next slide. Killer slide. Killer. I mean, not much can be said. I mean, this is what they need, a flat Earth to do it. So they put that whole equatorial plane on top, which is the alt-az method, horizontal method. Total destruction for them.
Excellent work. Thank you, 10th.
You got it.
We're not going to get through housekeeping. Anybody got any comments? We've done a lot of elevation angle stuff today.
I have just a question, just for learning purposes.
Ed?
So, and this sounds like it's like a reoccurring statement / kind of like barrier that we're not passing, I guess, in a lot of these conversations. So, as a species, as a human species, we only have one way of calculating like celestial navigation. Since, and this is what mainstream says, is that we've been to space, is there any other way of terms of measurements once you reach space, or do we still measure everything still the same and relative to being beyond the stratosphere and stuff? Like, it's just a question I think I'm kind of like stuck in, is like, do we have a new science for measurement once you leave the Earth?
Strato what now?
Like, so like to measure like celestial navigation, like you guys are using the
no, you missed what I said.
Tools.
You said strato.
Okay.
Strato what now? When we get to the strato what now?
Like the stratosphere, the atmosphere.
Atmo what now?
Right. And that's what I'm saying. So if there's a claim to have been left the Earth, like if we've left the Earth, is there a new form of measurement to navigate the planet?
What planet?
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by left the Earth. So you're under this apprehension that we've got air in a particular shape. Stratosphere, atmosphere. These are sort of oxymoron terms that define how the air would work on a planet. And when you say we go out and leave Earth, well, what do you mean? Leaving the containment of the... We don't know what that is or how to leave it to assert that we've left it. In terms of what they assert we have left would be second law of thermodynamics violation, ball Earth falling in a presuppositional orbit around the sun with gas pressure not vacating into the area of volume that it has available to it. Well, that area in the heliocentric model, called in your words space or outer space, isn't a real place. So what we're left with is the understanding that because we're breathing gas pressure, there must be some form of containment, and whether or not we know we don't know what it is. So how can we know if we've left it or not, or what it is to be leaving it? You know what I mean? I'll just do a quick shout outs as we're still live. So wonderful show, says Mike 808. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Retro Bill says excellent show, boys. Tight info. Thank you for the super chat, Retro Bill. Really do appreciate your support. There's a couple of things I want to shout out before we do end the live show. So any last comments? We're going to run over a little bit, but I don't mind. No? Okay.
Well, I'll comment. I'll comment on what the caller just said. They are doing it and showing you how they do it. They use a bubble to mirror the flat Earth underneath. They have an artificial horizon 30,000 feet up in the air. It's a flat plane.
Right. So the claim is to have been like in space and away from the planet. Do you think that if that claim is correct, there would be a new form of measurement, so to speak, to measure distance from
You're asking about
what
how
they call
I can compare and contrast two different worldviews. So if I flip the question to highlight the absurdity, if I say, if it is true that they've been to Narnia and the world that they experienced there was a journey that we could compare to, how would the journey that we took, comparable to the journey to Narnia, what would that be like? Can you see how absurd that is to ask when you know that the place you're asking about a comparison for isn't a real place to compare to? There is no outer space. So when you say, where we're going to, have we been where? There is no there to go to. It's a fake place.
Thank you for answering. Thank you for answering my question.
That's all right. Good question.
Listen.
Go on, Brian.
Sorry. Very quickly, I know you're finishing the show. Listen to the after show. I'm going to lay out something, and that will destroy their distances that they claim.
Cool. Absolutely, yeah. Stay tuned after I've done a few plugs. So I want people to check out my shorts videos. I haven't lost any enthusiasm for those little videos that I've been piling together in a short list, or a playlist, I should say. And yeah, just check out those videos, because as a combination on a playlist, it's a very interesting boiled down version of what makes up flat earth debate and the majority of the debating points that are current, at least. So I want to plug that playlist. Also, I'm going to release a video shortly about hi-fi. If anybody's interested, I know occasionally there's a few people who might watch the show that know I've got a high degree of enthusiasm for the subject of hi-fi, or high fidelity reproduction, or audiophile reproduction, not just in the studio setting, which I often talk about, but for a hi-fi audience that I may not currently reach when I do have a little bit of information to offer on that subject. So I'm going to offer that out, see how that goes. If you're interested, check it out. I'll release it shortly after this show ends. But if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. Another massive thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980, no, in the live stream, Nathan Oakley 1980 live stream. Hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, joining as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, hitting the PayPal link and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley. Stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream, and I will see you all in the next video. Indeed, says James Mason. Thanks for sharing. And I echo that sentiment to all of you in the live stream. Thank you very, very much for sharing the show, as there's currently 160 live participants. So massive thank you to all of you who shared the show.